It's high noon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 15 of Foul Play. That's Fantasy Overwatch League play. Keeping with tradition of not getting all of our regular co-hosts and hosts to be here every single week, we are operating a little shorthanded. No Blevins this week to talk smack about how he did, but we do have somebody that did very well this week. But anyways, I digress. I am joined, as per the usual, by Asmith. How are you doing today, my friend?
Man, I am so good. I just saw Avengers Infinity War, and I'm just going to go ahead and give you all the spoilers. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that because I would literally hate myself.
I already muted you, just for the sake of your body. Well, anyways, it's been a busy week. We obviously had a bunch of high noon stuff going on this weekend. We had the 12-hour patron stream. We had the game night that went until 4 a.m. last night. I'm still exhausted from that, wondering how I'll possibly get to sleep in time to wake up for work on Monday. But that's my problem. I will deal with it tomorrow and hate myself when my alarm starts going off. But anyways, let's start the show off as we normally do and discuss how we did this past week. A. Smith, why don't you start us off here, bud?
Well, I'm not even really super excited about this because I went 0-2. My DPS did not show up. Effect has left the country. I don't know what's up with this. All my players and leaving the country. They're just nobody likes to stay apparently.
Well, I feel you there. Mine prefer to get benched for not just performance reasons or not even like their performance reasons. Just I don't know, just somebody else. Yeah, just cause.
I just love it when that happens. So I mean, what are you gonna do? I watched the NFL draft. That was great. So.
Yeah, definitely an interesting week from the NFL draft perspective, but that is
way better than my fantasy week. Let's just go with that.
That is a different a different show altogether. One I would love to do, but as far as my fantasy week goes for Overwatch League, I actually am the one that's going to have the good week this week. I went 3-0. I'm counting the Podcast Battles League because I played against Blevins and I crushed him into the ground like a grape, if you will. Also, I got a win versus Blazin' Bob, who was in first place. I now knocked him down to second place. He's tied with Blevins, but knocked him down a peg, kept myself in the playoff hunt there. So really, really happy about that. But got the win there. That was in the old scoring format and absolutely demolished Thornrain in the new scoring format. It was like 1,100 to like 500 or something like that. I don't know. It was probably more like 800. But I think that was the 1,100 one. My teams are actually putting up acceptable point totals now. Shout outs to Mistakes and Saya Player for filling the DPS void that was Shadowburn and Bird Ring. So I did not expect to be able to ever replace those players. And who knows if I found anybody near as consistent as they were when they were starting. But for the time being, I'm going to choose to be optimistic because
just in time for playoffs. I mean, that's all that matters, right?
Yeah, you don't when you're using a playoff format, which most people aren't. But we're going to talk about ours in depth anyways on the show because the playoff format's just a whole lot more fun, and you should all be doing this if at all possible. But so we're going to be talking about that in the coming weeks because, A. Smith, we only have 2 more weeks of regular season action before we cut to the playoffs in each of our expert leagues.
Okay. Yeah.
Very, very excited about it. We'll be doing week 1 of the next stage, the final stage, stage 4. We'll count towards the regular season. Then weeks 2, 3, and 4 will be our playoff weeks. And just like in regular fantasy football, I'm observing the final week of the season as this doesn't count because you never know. People will be locked into the playoffs. Their seeding will be set. We could see New York play everybody, every backup, teams like that. They'll be in a situation at that point in the season where you might be seeing like Boston's backups and things like that. So you might see Snow start over Neko, and that's just really messes with fantasy in a way that's not a whole lot of fun for anybody, I don't think. So, that's why we're doing that. If you're ever wondering, I'm sure that will come up again. But A. Smith, let's move this conversation along. Talk about the week that was in Overwatch League Stage 3, Week 4, right? Yeah, week 4, I believe.
Week 4.
Yeah, it's so I constantly get the number of weeks inside each stage and the number of stages inside the season mixed up in my head, but got there eventually with a little help from you. I appreciate that. So for the leaders, anyways, we have 3 of each because usually Blevins is here. So we'll just kind of alternate who takes 2. Let's start things off in the tank department. There's a couple Dallas Fuel players here, which is a bit of a thonker, Asmith. So why don't you take this one and explain it?
Look, in what is the ashes of this Dallas Fuel team this season, there are some highlights, and I like to talk about them when we got it right now. And that highlight is it's Winston Lab, really. It's actually not their play. Winston Lab left them on tank, and so Taimu and Siegel put up 204 and 200.2 points respectively. That's number 2 and number 3 tank overall because, well, they started playing DPS. And playing DPS, you tend to get a lot more kills. Who knew? You get a little more kills as a DPS as opposed to a tank. And we're seeing, you know, some like Mike say, Taimu's returning to form. Siegel's looking pretty good. The rest of the team is Taimu's looking okay, but not really that great. I mean, he doesn't look as bad as when he first started, and he doesn't look as bad as when he was on Winston. So if they are still tanks come next week, they're going to be great plays, 100% plays, because FX still in Korea.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think Siegel probably should remain a tank in the system, despite the goofiness of this. This is why you're rewarded for flexible players in some cases, and why Siegel maybe held a little more value, especially once this switch happened. But Taimu's never going to play tank again. There's no reason he's still listed as tank, and it's a little frustrating that he is. But nonetheless, if he remains there...
They don't have a Genji, so Siegel's probably going to still play Genji.
That's true, but I don't think you switch him for like 2 weeks when he's filling in. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you switch his role designation. That would seem sloppy to me. But with Taimu, like, he's never going back to tank.
Didn't he say it? I think he said in an interview that he's staying at DPS again.
He might have, but honestly, it's going to be so hard to tell with them. I think they're going to do so much experimentation. It is a little bit rough, but one thing's for sure. Taimu's definitely not a tank.
I have a fix for this, okay? I have a fix for this. Because they go off of, like, character recognition and whatever, if they could recognize that when a player is a certain character, they got points for as that type of character, wouldn't that be crazy? Just think about that.
I personally wouldn't like that because I think it creates a really interesting dynamic when you have like the lineups like Junkertown where you have your DPS players that are rewarded for setting up as Bastion, or your not your DPS players, but your support players that are rewarded for being flexible, playing the Bastion or the Roadhog or something like that. But either way, it's definitely a couple ways to handle it, but in none of them is Taimu a tank, so please fix that. Moving on here, though, another tank leader from last week was Bishu. He had 156 points this past week. He's really been stepping up lately. Obviously, the whole tank line here from the Gladiators playing really, really well. They're you can see it. They're continuing to mesh better as a duo here, moving into the final stage of the season. So Gladiators fans have that to root for, and fantasy owners that maybe have been stashing Bishu now have a viable, flexible option. Preferably you have somebody better to start, but obviously if he's capable of putting up the number 4 tank spot, we need to start to consider using him over maybe like your Fraggies or your Winston players who have traditionally scored more points. But we've been seeing the resurgence of the Diva a little bit lately with Cool Matt coming back a little bit. I'm trying to think of the other. Note has been performing very, very well in fantasy points. So interesting to see. And speaking of Note, since I brought him up, I guess I'll take the double this time around. Note with 153 points, right behind Bishu, the number 5 tank, as Boston continues to roll and play pretty well and pretty solid Overwatch without Dreamcasper in the lineup. We did expect them to turn down a little bit. Definitely not the case. Looking at their matchups this week, I think it's likely they end up winning out the rest of the way here. So big ups for anybody that owns Note on their fantasy team. I think he's also a very viable starting option here. Moving into the support side of things for leaders, Asmith, why don't you lead us off here? We've got a pair of Gladiators, and you can take them both now, or I'll go a step in between them. But why don't you talk about these guys?
All right. Look, these Gladiators have shown up. They have turned into something that is, one would say, incredible here. Look, the first one is Shaz. He put up 257 points. That is good for, you put number 1, but it is definitely the number 2 overall support, unless you're counting Jonak as a DPS, because he basically is at this point. Shaz put up an amazing amount of points, and the reason these gladiators are in there is because they played 5 maps both times, so 10 total maps, and that really helps out those points. Look, Shaz has been phenomenal all season. I'm not super surprised. I think he is currently, overall, he is the number 3 support, so I'm not super surprised. But who I am super surprised is Big Goose.
It's not
the
a small
biggest
goose.
Of gooses.
He was loose this weekend.
Yeah, Big Goose was loose, man. He put up 230 points. That is your number 4 overall support. I mean, guy was just tearing it up. I've never seen a Lucio / Mercy / whatever they play at this point, main support, score that high.
Neptuno's one of the only ones I think
has
that's
he
gotten
put up
in
that
there.
many?
It's got to be close if he hasn't been there.
He had one that was 237, but that was in the Mercy meta.
And a 235.
So, yeah. Since
been up
Mercy meta, I've never seen anything this high. It's been crazy. I'm super excited because Big Goose is one of my favorite players. It's a phenomenal thing to see. He's one of your best main supports. Continue to roll this guy out, man. I love it. I want to keep seeing him go.
Yeah, part of my strategy in one of our leagues was actually like, I don't know who among the Lucio players is going to be very good, but I feel confident 1 or 2 of them are going to find some value. And I took like 3 or 4 of them in one of the leagues, and Big Goose was one of them. So I'm really happy that he seems to have fleshed out and panned out for me. Hopefully it can work going forward. And yes, I definitely had all the numbers wrong on the supports because it was while you were still doing them, and I don't think Jonak was done yet.
Yeah.
But anyways, I fixed them now. So our number 3 support on the week is our last support leader. That is Neko from the Boston Uprising, 244 points. Again, good for the number 3 support spot. We've talked about it. Boston is rolling. They're very consistent. Anybody you're using, you can continue to use, things like that. Really no negatives to come from the Boston camp lately, unfortunately.
And of notice, I think 2 other people we want to throw out there is Bedozan and Zupe. They have both put over 200 points, which is phenomenal for them. They're continuing their rise.
Yeah, Zebosai had a really, really good week too. Squeaked into the top 10 with 158 points. A bit of a drop off from Unko at 9, but nonetheless a good performance from him. And yeah, listen, we talked about how good the Gladiators were. If you missed these Houston Outlaws LA Gladiators match this weekend, make sure you catch it. I don't know that I've seen 2 teams elevate their level of play at the same time like that before, but honestly, I thought both teams were playing out of their mind good for what their rosters do. They were playing at a level to beat and compete with anybody in the league that day. It was really, really good Overwatch. Make sure you check it out. And the reason I'm still talking about it is because as we move into the DPS category here to talk about the leaders there, topping the list, obviously he was number 2, he wasn't number 1, but topping the list of leaders because it was a bit of a surprise. Nice to see him back up here. But Linkser with 234 points. Lights out. I mean, the meta is transitioning back more towards the Widowmaker side of things. Like we're kind of like in this in between right now, between stage 1 and stage 2 metas, where the Tracer's still really relied upon, but the Widow's also back in. It's not so as much pure dive. It's been a lot of fun to watch the adaptation of this meta, and Linkser continuing to stand out as one of, if not the best Widowmakers in Overwatch League. And again, the other 2 players here are just, there's a Gladiator and a Boston Uprising, so not a ton of analysis on them. I'm just going to read them off. We've already talked about both teams. Asher, 210 points, good for the number 3 DPS spot, and Mistakes at 192, good for the number 4 spot as well. Really nice to see Mistakes being very consistent in his role now here. Hopefully that can continue going forward. I don't know that that's really been the case for his duration of playing. What have you thought of Mistakes lately?
He's gotten a lot better, to be honest with you. When he first came in, he looked shaky. We know how good of a Tracer player he is, but we didn't really know his other skill sets, to be honest with you. And I've been pretty surprised at his flexibility. His Widow has been not the best in the world, but it's been pretty decent. It's
Yeah.
been pretty comparable, and he's even thrown some Genji out. I mean, he's really can't come into his role as a true flex DPS that can kind of do anything. He's become a Swiss Army knife, much like a mini libero, if you would. And I like how he's developed, and I think this is good for his stock going into the off season.
Yeah, definitely. As I think all these players were on 1-year contracts, so could see
I think
some.
everybody is,
Yeah.
with the possibility of a 2-year.
Yeah, maybe like a team's
A player
discretion
option
extension or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Team option or something.
The language on those is definitely iffy, but I think we're going to see a ton of shakeup. So it's really important for these players to be worried about their individual status here as well as the team. But
Yeah, another player that I think would make this DPS thing, and we'll kind of discuss it. Look, we don't have Shanghai and Philly stats right now. The Winston's lab has continued to drop the ball, much like they did last week. They delayed on this week, at least on getting this one game. So I don't know what's up with it. But Ado put up ridiculous number of points. He put up, where was he at? 139 in game 1. And they played 5 maps in game 2, and he looked pretty good. I venture to say he probably put up somewhere in the 250, 240 mark, and that's good for top 3, top 5 DPS.
Yeah, that's number 2. Linkser at number 2 is 234, so some definite potential to be right up there at the top of the list.
Yeah, so I think Ado probably, wait until we see what the final stats are, but I've got a good feeling that Ado's going to be in the top 5. He's been, I was very skeptical of him going in, but because I saw him as a Genji one trick and really not that great of a Genji, but he's proven me wrong. He's really made me eat some crow, and I'm fine with it because Shanghai needed a star DPS player, and I think Ado's becoming that for them.
Yeah, this is something I said in the Discord server earlier this week. There's not one player in Overwatch League that I've been more wrong about than Ado, because I thought I basically said like they found the DPS equivalent of Roshan to roll out there. Like he was like a backup on on a mediocre team in Korea, and he just wasn't. It didn't see it. It didn't add up. But what they saw that I didn't see was him playing in scrims and trying out for the team. And clearly he was able to show some of this. And this, especially in fantasy, is this kind of a take a second to learn the lesson kind of thing. Regardless of what you think on a player, right? If they're coming into the league and they're in a situation where they can have an impact, they're worth a flyer to pick them up and store them on your bench for a little while, because you never know. Even when I don't like a player, I will still make a move and pick them up sometimes, because I'm not always right, and you have to be willing to be wrong and still benefit from it at times. So keep that in mind when you're picking up and or adding and dropping players during the weeks, this season, next season, whenever. You never know. All they need is an opportunity, and then for you to be wrong. And if you're not a paid analyst, you've got a fair chance to be wrong. Moving along, though, let's talk about some of the feeders here from last week. Starting off in the tank section, there's only 2 here. So, Asmith, I'll let you go first. Pick whichever one of these gentlemen you want to talk about.
Look, I'm going to take Fate. He put up 124 points, number 15 overall tank. He was notably below Space. Not by much, but still he's below his diva player, and that's very rare that we see a main tank player below their diva player in these roles. Fate has disappeared these last couple weeks, much like Valiant's confidence has. And guess what I just learned by watching this last Inside Valiant? Hey, their coach disappeared too, so he had to go back to Korea. So I wonder if this is having a direct impact on the team's performance. Yes, they have had a step up in competition, but they don't look as cohesive as a unit as they did before.
No, definitely not. And honestly, when they made the move to cut Envy and move into Space, we're starting to see a little bit of what I was worried about. And, I never doubted Space's mechanical ability on the Diva hero. He's shown that, but you have to question their team cohesion. And Fate and Envy were a duo for so long, and the Valiant were clearly trying to hold on to that playoff hopes and that playoff chance. And I personally thought they went too far with it, but we will have to see. They did a good job kicking around the teams they should have beat, regardless of their roster moves early on in the stage, and now they're having a little bit of trouble going into some of the tougher competition. This week they got the win against the Florida Mayhem, but honestly, despite the 3-1 score, got kicked around pretty good by the Houston Outlaws. Wasn't really that close or competitive until Junkertown, when Houston had already won, and as they said, like, we kind of stopped scrimming or working on Junkertown because nobody was able to touch us on it for the longest time, so they just need to refresh that. But yeah, the Valiant are, I think, iffy to make the stage playoffs now at this point.
I don't think so. I think they're still pretty set. I mean, I think they need one win this week. I think if they go 0-2, then it's a possibility that they drop.
Okay, because they're still X-2.
They're still 6-2.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, they're still in a good spot to get there.
I think they need to. I think 4 losses, you're a bubble team. If you have 3 losses, you're guaranteed to be in.
Yeah, that should be the case. Yeah, for whatever reason, I thought they had 3 losses on them, so my bad there. But we'll talk about their matchups this week. Definitely, the 0-2 is definitely very possible.
100%.
Yeah, so we will see how that goes for them. But the other tank feeder here that we're going to talk about is Miro of the Seoul Dynasty. Honestly, they even had a minor bounce back this week. It's tough to say that when you've got a 4-0 loss on the schedule, but it was against New York. It happens to a lot of people. They did pull out the 3-2 win over the Philadelphia Fusion. The reason I'm tempted not to say Seoul had a bit of a rebound is that Philly is kind of on the schneid a little bit right now, I think is the term. Definitely not playing their best Overwatch of the season at the moment, and managed to drop that one to Seoul. And in that win, Miro notably didn't really produce in the way we want to see, somebody that you're starting on a weekly basis, which is definitely why I drafted Miro, so I assume a lot of people drafted him. 62 points in a 5-map win is just really not good enough from a fantasy perspective. But let's move along, talk about some support players here. Again, only 2 of them, so Asmith, take it away, whoever you want to talk about.
Look, I'm going to take the sleepiest of the options, and that is Sleepy's 129 points, number 13 overall support. Look, he just hasn't been, quite frankly, they got just stomped in the against London. I mean, London stomped them pretty hard, and in what looked to be like a London getting revenge back to their old self kind of game, and getting beat that bad. I mean, he put up, oh my gosh, he put up 48 points for a main support. That's pretty weak. You can't do that in a 4-map set. 48 points as a support. Look, and he even sat out one, even in their win, I believe they won their first game. He even sat out there. They sat out against in Junkertown. If you do recall that, do you remember they played with Nomi and Super? And Sleepy sat out. It was kind of a weird, it seemed like they were just kind of screwing around, to be honest with you. Look, Sleepy's he's become a little bit of worrisome to me. I just don't know where he fully stands. He looks like he'll be okay, but for now I'm a little hesitant. Maybe it was just the competition they played, but I'm still pretty hesitant here.
Yeah, it's been a fall from grace from the number 3 player that he was when we looked at things in between stages last time. So definitely going to have to kind of reevaluate him a little going forward. And my option is here is much like my first one before, is Jae Hong. I don't know. Should we stop being surprised? Does this still count as a feeder anymore? But 116 points is even low on the end of his bad games here. So number 16 support overall in the week. Listen, he has 2 different types of games. Games like this where you're disappointed, and games where he hits in the low 200s and you're okay with it. He's never been happy with your Jae Hong performance from fantasy here. He's still continuing not to live up to those expectations, but this week especially, he didn't even live up to his lowered expectations that we've kind of developed over the last couple weeks. Moving on, let's talk about some DPS feeders here last week. There's a few here, A. Smith, and we do have 3 of them. Pick whichever one you want to talk about here.
These hurt, man. Look, the guy I have been saying for the longest time that this guy gets his points, regardless of everything, that this guy will get his points. He's on the feeder list soon. He put up 52 points, the 25 DPS overall. I mean, look, since Bunny has been playing, I really question Valiant's decision making with this, because since Bunny has been playing, they have not looked good, to be honest with you. He didn't play the first two maps, the first two games when they really stomped. And then Bunny looked good the first game he played. And then from there, it's kind of gone downhill, to be honest. And I don't understand running Agilities and Bunny together, because it's, you know what's going to happen. It is going to be a dive, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, no option. Bunny doesn't play other characters. Soon gives you more flexibility. I question more Valiant's decision making, but in the case Soon was, even when Soon was playing, he was getting owned. So I mean, Soon just looked pretty bad. So like his Widowmaker play was very suspect this week, and it was very noticeable. I'm pretty sure the casters were putting up stats and things, and it was ugly.
Yeah, they've definitely been struggling after, like we said, after getting the round of easy opponents to start off the stage for them. They've really dropped off quite a bit. Not too much to say about it really, other than just you have to be worried going forward if you own Valiant players. Be very cautious. But I agree with everything you're saying. I still think their best Widowmaker player is Kareev. And they should maybe try to find ways to use it if they know they're going to be playing Widow on the map pretty well full time. But not the easiest thing to do to flex, your support player over into that position for half a map or for a whole map or something like that. You definitely pay in other areas. But moving on here, we're going to talk about the San Francisco Shock DPS player Sinatra with just 30 points this week. The number 27 DPS player. Listen, this is a little bit to me why I thought I was so sure San Francisco was going to move Dante somewhere, right? Like we saw, Bunny get moved. I thought it was going to be one of those moves where, Dante's a great player. They've been lucky to have him and he can contribute on any roster, but now you're stuck and you just don't have, you've got two players that are in a very similar position skill wise. I think, they're slightly different hero pools, but both of them are predominantly tracer players. Architect has proven to be very flexible and fit in great into that flex DPS role, and I'd really love to see what they can do if they just picked one of the two, Sinatra or Dante, rolled them out there and stuck with it. I think that might be their best bet. Especially Architect pulled the Widowmaker out of literally nowhere. It was nowhere near his hero pool leading into this signing, and he plays it at a solid level where he can compete and do just fine in Overwatch League. We've seen, I think, enough of that to feel confident in that, so I'd love to see them be confident enough in one of these two Tracer players to roll them out there and stick with them, but right now that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, look, Architect has kind of become what EQO has, or what Dreamcasper was, to be honest with you. It's kind of crazy to me to think about, because Architect kind of has that the Dreamcasper hero pool with the Widowmaker in it. So it's pretty nice to see, and you give him as the constant, and then you get Sinatra and Dante as your kind of flex options, with Baby Bay riding the bench.
Yeah, hard to argue with. We'll take the last feeder here off our hands, Asmith, and then we'll move on to the matchups.
This guy, I'm not 100% surprised, to be honest with you. He put up 133 points, number 14 overall DPS, and that's Fleta. Look, you paid for him. You thought he was a first-round pick. He did amazing in preseason. He did amazing the first week.
First stage, even.
First stage, yeah, I could make the argument first stage. I don't know if his fantasy numbers back that up. Yeah, okay, they back it up, 100%. Okay, look, since stage one, Fleta has made a serious downtick. But I think that comes with Soul itself making a downtick. The team itself has looked shaky. Fleta himself is doing okay, but the team itself is not. And when your team is struggling, it's hard for you to gain fantasy points because your team's not really helping with those chip damage so you can get the final blows. And Fleta can't carry this team, much like he couldn't carry whatever team he was on before. I want to say it was like Conbox or something like that. No, I don't know. Whatever team Fleta was on before, it was like 1v11. That's kind of what it's looking like right now. I mean, I guess he's behind good old Munch, so Munch is still tearing it up, I guess. But Tracer players, it's kind of to be expected. So Fleta has just not been producing. He's not your top 15 talent that you kind of expect.
Yeah. Definitely the case there, and he, like you said, he still meets the eye test, right? You watch him play, he still looks really good, and it's one of the reasons why live scoring I think might be helpful in fantasy, because I feel like if I owned Fleta and I was playing him, and I don't, and I'm not, thankfully, but I feel like watching their games, I'd be happy with it. I think I'm going to get a good point total from it, and then I'd see the score, and it just wouldn't necessarily be the case. Got to be a little frustrating. So. Unless you're my opponent this week, my hearts go out to you on that front. But moving on, let's talk about some of the matchups for next week as we go into Stage 3, Week 5. I'll be starting things off with the Atlantic Division here. We're going to be looking first at the Boston Uprising, matchups against the LA teams. First the Valiant, then the Gladiators, playing on Thursday and Friday. Almost everybody has 6 maps this week. One team gets it easy at 5, one team gets it tough at 7. Thankfully, it's Houston that gets it easy at 5, and Seoul, their opponent, their tougher opponent of the week, that gets it rough at 7 maps. I'll take that. But yeah, for the Boston Uprising here going into it, there's none of these guys you're not going to play. They're in a position, they've got momentum. They're going into these stage playoffs here. I think they're have they lost yet? I don't think so, right? No, 8-0 on the stage. So locked into the stage playoffs here. Nothing they can do can drop them out at this point. So you might think that might take some subs into account, but we haven't seen that at all from them. They've not taken any opportunities except for mistakes a little bit at the end of Stage 2. And I thought that was just prepping for the possibility of wanting to use Sombra on occasion and just get him some stage time. No reason to think any of the support players are going to come in or anything crazy like that. No DPS subs are possible. So I think you can rely pretty heavily on anybody from Boston going into this final week. Even the teams are good enough, you can see them going to 5, and Boston loves to go to 5 and get those extra maps for us. So I'm very, very confident in all Boston players that I own going into this week. Florida Mayhem have matchups against the Gladiators and the San Francisco Shock. They do play Wednesday, Thursday. They've got, like I said, 6 maps. That'll be pretty much it across the board. So I need to tell myself to stop saying the map totals here, I guess, is the lesson I'm trying to learn. Florida Mayhem players have been interesting. Saya player has been really, really on point. He's been playing very well. He's subbing out minimally. I don't have exact numbers on how often he's been in there versus out, but his performance, I think, is just kind of solidifying his playing time more and more. He's been playing really well as Florida continues to improve a little bit. I believe they got the win over Dallas this past week. So nice to see them get into the win column. Sorry, Asmith, I know you don't agree with that statement there, but nonetheless, I think you can
talk about it.
I think if you're in a situation like I'm in, where I own Saya player, and it's that, I've got Bird Ring and that giant question mark there, I'm terrified. You couldn't, even if they told me he was going to play, I'd want to see it for a week, right? I'm going to be very confident to roll Saya player out there as a replacement, so I'm really happy to own him. And the support players notably have been very strong for Florida in the past couple weeks. Both Zupe and Zebosai have been solid starts and putting up solid point totals. So I think you can go ahead and use them as, I think they've got a good chance to get a win against the San Francisco Shock team that still seems to be just trying stuff, right? And not really necessarily getting everything figured out as fast as they hope to in time to make a splash this stage. But moving on, we've got the Houston Outlaws matchups against the San Francisco Shock and the Seoul Dynasty. These are matchups that have like 5 map potential. There's honestly upset potential in both of these. I do have Houston favored to win both of them, so I like all their players as you're normally using them. I don't know how you could possibly bench Linkser coming off the performance he had. Overall, I think Houston is playing some of the best Overwatch that they have played throughout Overwatch League so far, but the meta doesn't quite agree with them as nicely. I think they're playing on par with Stage 1, but the meta doesn't line up quite as nice for Houston here. I will say both Jake and Linkser have looked notably improved on Tracer, and I'm now fairly confident that they can stand their ground and not just get run over, to be perfectly honest. In almost any matchup here going forward, we've seen them hold their own and go to 5 against New York this stage, Philly this stage, things like that. So even some of the best Tracer players in the world, they've been okay in those matchups, and the best tracer players in the world just aren't on the schedule this week. So I have no issues with any of the DPS guys, support players. You're not playing Bounty anyways. He hasn't really put up the performance. So you can play Raucous if you've been. The one thing I want to point out with Houston, I don't think it's necessarily like an auto loss or a huge signal anymore, but it is Route 66 in both matches here for Houston. So if you still think they're going to be really, really bad there, take that into consideration. The London Spitfire this week go against the Seoul Dynasty and the Shanghai Dragons. They have to play against the Shanghai Dynasty this week, Asmith. I just had to get that in there. They do play Friday and Saturday. Hureg had a pretty good week last week, so I think if you're in a desperate situation like we talked about, maybe you're also a Birdring / Shadowburn owner, you can consider using him. You have to be nervous, and I'm really paranoid that at any time Birdring's back and ready to go. I believe they were saying this week that he said he was healthy and could play, but the team wanted him to sit one more week. It makes sense. Get back to 100%. If you're not, I'm still... the way they've been talking has started to convince me a little bit that maybe his wrist is hurt.
Fisher went on statement saying, I really know I'm not on his team. I'm not feeling this with BS. Look, he really is hurt. Like Fisher went and said, and now I know we're not going to take everything Fisher says, but somebody from the team confirming that kind of sounds like I would believe it.
The only thing that's weird to me is he was like duoing with Rascal on his stream or something like that while he was hurt. And I get it, you're not going to stop playing completely.
I mean, play left-handed. Why not?
But it's just a little weird that they would be there doing like stream stuff when he's limiting his stage time. It's just a little goofy, but nonetheless, there's been so much talk about his rehab and things like that. You're almost forced to kind of give in and believe it a little bit here. But that just means if that's accurate, that at any time he comes back, he replaces Hureg, and they're good to go with Birdring again. So Hureg remains a really iffy choice. And again, we're very iffy across the board on all London players because they just might bench him. Moving on, we've got the New York Excelsior. They play against the Dallas FOWL and the Shanghai Dragons this week. I'm sorry, A. Smith, earmuffs. This is too good to be true. This is going to be bad for your New York Excelsior players. They're not going to get the point total you expected them to. The subbing in of Pine has done a lot of damage to the value of the DPS players regardless, for fantasy's sake. So the honeymoon's definitely over there with the stage 2. Only 2 of them playing all the time. I don't know, honeymoon. I don't know. Did I already say the phrase honeymoon? But anyways, their value is back down to what it is when Pine is playing a good amount, and that's exactly what he's doing now. So be a little iffy with those guys. Meko has not really rebounded with the rest of the Diva players, so continue to not really use him if you can avoid it. But otherwise, what are you going to do? Bench Jonak? It's probably not advisable. So moving along here. Maybe Jonek's, though, probably not going to be the number 1 support player. I'm going to call that right now. They're going to have too easy of a time in those matchups. He's just not going to have enough physical minutes in game to score. He'll play great.
I thought you meant overall, and I was like, are you smoking something, dude?
No, just
a point gap. Okay,
just on the week.
Got like a 500 point gap on everybody.
He'll still be there in the grand total for supports at the end, but probably not on the week. Anyways, last one here for me: the Philadelphia Fusion play against Dal and Vale. I don't know why it's very satisfying for me to see DAL and VAL on the opponent's list. But anyways, they play Wednesday and Saturday. I believe they're the first match of the week and the last match of the week. So plenty of time to prepare for 2 opponents that they should beat, and Philly needs a get right week. One thing I want to mention here, I believe Sato is active now.
Yes.
Yeah, because they have 2 playoff matches that seem to account towards his. Really weird. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't have any problem with it because we're on record here at High Noon about not being like not thinking boosting is morally reprehensible or anything like that. But given the verbiage of the suspension and the announcement and everything like that, I would lean towards he's able to play, which means he's worth picking up. Because like we talked about with Ado, no matter what you think of him, all he needs is an opportunity. And I can't say definitively he doesn't take Fraggy's job here. I just personally wouldn't be benching Fraggy with how he's been playing lately, but it's definitely something to consider and something for Fraggy owners to consider. Carpe owners have to roll him out. Snillo owners, no, you can't play him anymore. I think that's been decided. And EQO owners, if you're desperate, he's kind of splitting enough play time that he's not super valuable, but puts up a decent point total. So yeah, interesting to see how Philly gets themselves out of this slump though, because they're definitely not playing their best Overwatch. They definitely want to fix that, and they need to, because they are on the outside looking in at the stage playoff cut here. They're even behind Houston, who's first runners up outside of the top four. So they've got some work to do with their even record. I mean, they are just a perfectly 500 team across the board right now. They're 4-4, 19-9 in maps. I mean, everything is basically exactly what Houston's last stage looked like, if I'm being honest. 500 across the board. So Asmith, take it away with the Pacific Division here.
All right, I'm gonna kick it off with Dallas. Gosh, guys, as much as I would love to tell you this is gonna be Dallas getting a win, I just don't see it. With the effect gone, Dallas has looked kind of hollow as a team, and they don't have a head coach, to be honest. So from now on, I just kind of expect Dallas players to be kind of useless a little bit, and that's kind of scary for me to say. But what are you gonna do? They're playing Philly in New York, and even playing a Philly team that looks downtrodden, I still think they're gonna lose. There's a possibility that goes to 5 maps, just because Philly hasn't been playing well, but I doubt it, and they're going to get curb stomped by New York. So I don't start any Dallas players. I mean, let's be real. They're going to get curb stomped. I mean, it's going to be,
the only one that might be okay is Tankable on DPS might actually be okay, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Tankle and Tankle and Tank Taimu. I mean,
certainly possible.
Yeah, I mean, Tank Moo might be an option too. If they still are locked as tanks, then I don't know. Winston's Lab's been asleep, so who knows? They might just leave him. All right, next we're going to the Gladiators. They're playing Florida and Boston. And look, this is good. I like this week for Gladiators. Boston has been really good, but they've been playing close maps almost every time. This week was an exception. They played 8 maps this week as opposed to the usual 10 that they've been playing. So maybe Boston's kind of leveling up, but the Gladiators, I like their odds here to score some good fantasy points. You're still going to be on a rotation with your DPS, so be wary of that. But Fisher is the greatest tank. Fisher is the most handsome. Fisher is Fisher, and you're always going to start Fisher. Look, we're going off to the Valiant right now, and they're playing Boston and Philly, and I kind of like this week for Valiant. Look, I think they're going to lose to Boston, mainly because nobody else has beaten them this stage, and you can't just expect something crazy to happen, especially because Valiant hasn't been looking good, but playing a downtrodden Philly team is good for them. So I think there's a possibility there that they win some points. I think you're going to see a little bit more a little bit more points out of some of your Valiant players, but I just don't expect crazy numbers this week, especially since their coach is out of town, and I just don't think they know what they're doing with their DPS lineup right now. And as much as I would love to say Soon's going to get his, I don't think he is. So be wary of that. San Francisco Shock, they are playing the Houston Outlaws and the Florida Mayhem. I don't know what's going on there. And look, San Francisco has been pretty up and down. At one moment they look really good, the next I'm not sure what they're doing, but I kind of like their players right now. I like this matchup. These are two. Houston is kind of middle of the road team right now, and Shock have an upset potential here. I'm not going to say they are going to get the upset, but there is potential there.
They won it last time, so you got to say it's possible.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So and I mean they beat. I'm pretty sure San Francisco beat Seoul, or no, I don't know. They beat somebody this week that I didn't think they were going to. So look, San Francisco
lost both this week. So
did they? Okay, they beat somebody recently of recent memory. Look, I don't have the schedule in front of me. I've got not enough monitors. It's
Philly,
a problem.
Philly too. Yeah, Philly. 2 weeks.
Okay, they beat Philly. Yeah. Okay. Well. Regardless, I like San Francisco's options here, and then playing against Florida, I think they're going to get the win here, and Architect is going. I'm actually really looking forward to an Architect Say a Player matchup. That's going to be kind of fun to watch. But I kind of like starting your shock players due to the possibility of them really scoring pretty high, even with their crazy, weird Junkertown mess that they like to run. Then Seoul Dynasty, they are playing London and Houston, and look, Seoul has kind of looked pretty bad. They got demolished against New York Excelsior, and as much as losing 4-0 to New York Excelsior is not bad, look, most teams actually take one map off of New York Excelsior. They usually win 3-1, and I mean, this was a pretty bad beating, to be honest with you. And Seoul hasn't really looked that good before that, so I'm not on the Seoul Dynasty bandwagon here. They're playing London, who's looking to rebound, and as much as they played really bad, they stomped whoever they played that last game. They bounced back really strong. I think it was against San Francisco. So London's going to look pretty strong here, and I think Houston's just the better team right now than Seoul. And so I would be weary with your Seoul players, and Munchkin's still going to be a startable option. Be weary about everyone else. There is a Zephyr Zumba thing. I don't know why Zumba was gone this week, but I would keep an eye on that. Anyways, Shanghai Dragons, here we go. As much as I would love to, I like the resurgence. Look, Ado and Fearless have been looking good for fantasy value. Everyone else has been looking a little shaky. I'm not sure what they're doing with their support. Sky is seeing some playing time again, but they're playing New York and London, and it's just not going to be pretty this week. Shanghai is not going to do well this week. Their players are not going to do well. Don't start them just because they had good week last week, and just because they're looking like they're trending up. Ado and Fearless would be really my only two Shanghai Dragons that I would really consider starting. And even now, I wouldn't start them this week. It's going to be a stomping.
They're the only two that are possible, and Fearless is another one. Like, he had 86 points in his first matchup here. He outperformed Poco's first matchup, and then I think he played a little better than Poco did. I mean, they're different tanks, right? So, but their points count the same, and they're kind of in the same ballpark for finishes, I think. So, if you're wondering where exactly Fearless is, it's kind of right outside the top 10, but definitely inside the top 15. So he's definitely a very viable starter here. He probably finished in the top 10 this week if we were to have both matches worth of points. And I think, like you said, they're possibilities, but because of just how brutal that schedule is for them, it makes it really tough. But we're going to move things along here in the last segment we're going to do on the show today. We're just going to do sleepers and wrap it up. We had a late start recording, so and honestly, I don't think there's nobody I wanted to douse the flames on anyways, but
I might have it douse the flames.
Okay, well, we'll let you get that in real quick before we sign off. It's probably just the Houston Outlaws. But anyways, moving into the sleepers here on the DPS side of things. I beat Asmith last week because he didn't make any picks across the board, so I'm going first. I'm taking the prize. But yeah, listen, for my DPS sleeper, I'm going to be taking Architect. Like Asmith said, their matchups, like, I don't like them. I honestly think I have them losing both of them here against the Houston Outlaws and the Florida Mayhem. But Florida Mayhem, I'm picking an upset there, so there's definitely some really good chance. A really good chance for them to do some work in that matchup, even pull out the win. I think there's a lot of 5-map potential there. And after them beating Houston last time, listen, this is a very different case, right? Like, Houston's not slumping like they were when they met up last time. They're not, they're playing in a lot of people's opinions, some of the better Overwatch, especially Muma's. He was very, very vocal about it in comms, talking about if we can keep this up through the rest of the season, like, we will win the Overwatch League. We're playing that well right now. And I tend to agree with him that they're playing really well, not that they can win the Overwatch League if they keep it up. I think they need to improve and get better to do that. But nonetheless, there's an outside chance here that San Francisco has a chance at it. Architect has been getting better on a weekly basis. I'm more confident in his playing time than Sinatra's, which I would have thought was an insane proposition 3 weeks ago. But nonetheless, that's where we're at. His Widowmaker has been a big surprise, a pleasant one, and I'm going to take a bit of a flyer here on him and pick him for our little game. Asmith, who do you got?
Look, I've got mistakes. He is playing in. He's playing both London or not London. Man, I am off the board here. He's playing both Los Angeles teams this week, and Boston has been looking amazing. And I look to see them continue to get better and better. I think mistakes will probably put somewhere close to 200 points this week. It might be a little bit cheating, but look, most people weren't expecting him to be a standout player. So I think he's going to be a good start this week. I think you're going to expect close to 200 points for him. And I like to see them pop off. I think Boston has the very, very close potential to go 10-0 in a stage, and that has not been done yet. So that would be crazy if Boston goes 10-0 in a stage.
Definitely not cheating. Last week he was tied with AKM for points, so I think he's definitely inconsistent enough over there. We've only had him for 3 weeks.
Not tied with him this week.
No, and we've only had him for 3 weeks essentially in the lineup here, so it's hard to know exactly what you've got. So he definitely, I think, still qualifies and is a really good pick, safer than the Architect pick, but I think a little bit less upside. Moving in here though to the tank position, for myself, I'm going to be taking Note for a lot of the same reasons you just mentioned with mistakes, except for there's a little bit more upside to me. Note might be the best diva in Overwatch League. I think he's really, really close to there. He plays a different style than guys like Cool Matt and Meko, who I would say, so it's really hard to compare them, right? Because Note's really aggressive. He pushes in a lot more. He dives with the team. The team as an overall is a much more aggressive team, especially in their dive compositions. So, depending on what style you wanted, I wouldn't say Note's the best, but if you want an aggressive diva, you've got one in Note, and Boston's got one. He's got a really good tank partner with him. The DPS is playing well. I mean, anytime you're diving with Striker, you've got to feel pretty good about your chances to pick up a couple kills. So yeah, I'm going to be going with Note here. I'm surprised he's still sub 15, but I guess that's just how far divas fell there for that stage and a half in stage 2 in the first half of 3.
Yeah, divas were a problem. Look, I'm going to take Bishu here. Look, Gladiators are playing Florida and Boston, and I really like their matchup in Florida, and I think they can have a potential of going to 5 with Boston and maybe take the upset there. Yeah. Bishu has been looking really good the last couple of weeks. I don't know when Void is getting in, but until then, I don't think Bishu has any chance of losing his spot or losing any playing time, especially since he's still translating. So, you can't lose your in-game translator, can you? But Bishu is going to be good. He's going to be good this week, and so I really like Bishu here. I think he's got a higher upside than Note potentially this week.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with, and especially, like I said, the Gladiators and the Outlaws together. Like, I really think they kind of showed another gear that maybe we weren't expecting from them in that match. Both teams, obviously the Gladiators, it's easier to buy because they won. But yeah, I think they're definitely on the up, and it started to look like maybe they plateaued a little bit. So definitely great to see. I think Bishu's a really solid pick here. A lot of good sleeper options this week, I thought. On the support side of things, I'm going to be taking Zebosai. We've talked about the Florida Mayhem matchups this week. They do go against the San Francisco Shock. They've got upset potential against the Gladiators, but I think we need to see the Gladiators take a step backwards for them to really get that. But I don't think they'll be blown out there. I think they've actually been playing well enough now with Saya player that they'll be competitive even in losses. So yeah, I'm going to be going with Zebosai here. I think the Florida Mayhem are going to have another good week. Maybe not find the win column, but potentially. You never know. All
right. I'm going to take... Look, I think this bears mentioning. The guy's number 11 overall, but nobody expected him to be a good player. And I would take Zupe if he was available. Zupe has been phenomenal the last several weeks. He is slowly has somehow become the number 11 overall support. I don't think anybody saw this coming, and he might even still be on the bench or be on the unpicked up place, the waiver wire still.
Yeah. I think I picked him up last week in some leagues, so that's definitely
true. I mean, so I think this just bears mentioning. Like, Zuppe needs to be picked up, and I think he can be started this week. Now, I'm not gonna pick him because I think that breaks the rules of the game, but I do think it needs to be mentioned that he would be a sleeper in the aspect of actually people not thinking he's startable.
Yeah.
But in the rules of this game, I think I'm going to go with closer here. It's a complete gamble. It's less of a gamble than gambler, but I like how they played Badosin and closer exclusively last week, which has been a kind of a different thing because usually it's Badosin and Nuss and closer and Hago. But with this Badosin and closer, it looks like they might be trying to figure out a lineup that they want to stick with, just to try to levelize because they've been in total flux the last couple of weeks. And so because they're trying to levelize, even though they're playing the Shanghai Dynasty right now this week, and yes, I meant to say Shanghai Dynasty, playing the Dragons and they're playing the Dynasty. I think they're going to try to get some wins on the board and get some confidence back, and I think closer is going to play every map. Don't count me on that, but I think he's a sneaky play this week.
Yeah, I hope they identified what I thought I saw this week, and that might have been their best support combo of the season. I thought, as a support unit, I thought they played really, really well this past weekend. The team obviously, lost to Boston, but a lot of people do, and then had to pull out the close win against the LA Valiant there. Or am I? Yeah, I'm 1 week too far back. I'm losing my mind. So they got the 4-0 win against the San Francisco Shock in that matchup, and they did lose the close one to the Gladiators. That didn't sound right either. I was saying the first one. But yeah, so I think they're kind of getting back on the right track a little bit here, and I really think there's something to that Badosin and closer combo. So I think that's a good pick, but I just, like the indecision you had wasn't about whether or not it's the right call. It's just whether or not they were going to make that call. So it's definitely iffy, but if he does play, I think closer should be a pretty good start. All right, you want to do a quick douse the flames here before we sign off?
I mean, can I douse the flames on Hureg? I'm just saying he played number 5 overall DPS this week. He's been playing like he really wants to own that starting spot and not give it back to Birdring, but I do think Birdring is going to play, and I've got suspicions that this week is the week Birdring plays. So be careful with Hureg. But he has potential to put some points on this week. But I do want to douse the flames on him. And I think I'm going to douse the flames on the fuel tank duo that is Sequel and Paimu. Because I just think, I for some reason, I keep putting my faith in Winston's Lab that they're gonna fix this. So pay close attention this week on those things. But overall, I think that's the rest of it. I think most everybody else is kind of playing to where they should.
I've been really surprised looking at it. It's almost been difficult to come up with leaders and feeders in the last couple of weeks because I look at the output and I'm like, this is kind of similar to what I like. There's been a couple outliers, so we've been able to keep doing the leaders, but yeah, it's been a little rough. And I think you're 100% right. Like Hureg's very iffy, but if we get some form of definitive word before Wednesday kicks in and the roster's lock that Birdring is going to be out one more week, pounce on it because Hureg becomes a viable starter. Maybe not top 5, but I think top 10 is certainly very likely. Top 15 should certainly happen for him.
All right, I got a question for you.
Hit me.
Lord Bet.
Oof.
Architect mistakes. What do you think?
I don't think I want that. Personally, I just think they're so close.
Note Bishu.
I'll take that one.
All right.
That one's fun. I think Note is definitely the better of the two. Bishu's got a shot, but I think it's in my favor.
I think it's gonna be close.
Yeah, it's gonna be really close.
I think it's gonna be a fun Lord Bet. Hey, whatever happened to you and Blevins King Bet?
It pushed.
Did it push?
They went 1-1 that week.
Okay, so what does that mean? I mean, it's just
That just means
void now?
nobody lost. Nobody lost, nobody
Oh,
won.
okay.
It's just like the bet didn't happen, unfortunately.
All right, I listened last week because, and I apologize to the viewers. I can't. Mondays are really, really hard for me, so that's why I'm not able to make Mondays usually. But hopefully, I'm on Sundays. I'm pretty much always here. So, but Lord Bet, no Bishu, you're on.
All right, we will take that one. That definitely sounds like a good one to me. That's going to wrap up the show here. So big thanks to Asmith for hanging out and doing this a little bit later than we normally do. Really, really appreciate you being here this week. Again, don't blame him too much when he misses episodes, because he still does all of our point totals, and he still does a lot of work for the show, even when he's not physically on the air. So our thanks for that as well while you were out last week. Really appreciate it. But good luck, everybody, going into this final week. We will be back next week with a recap episode at the end of the stages. Who knows when the stats will be up. Hopefully, if they're missing any by the time we record, it's only one like this week. But again, it'll be stage playoffs. We've got the extended format with 4 teams. It should be a crazy hype Overwatch League weekend next weekend, so we hope you all enjoy it. We did skip the mailbag in part because we didn't have a ton of questions, and also because of time purposes. But by all means, get any questions you have to us on Discord, discord.me/High Noon Podcast. Join up. There is a fantasy mailbag text channel. You can type your questions in. We ask them all the time, so we really appreciate and enjoy answering your guys' questions, so don't feel bad about asking them.
I'm going to call out Bellman. Wasn't Bellman the one that leaves the meme questions? I missed the meme questions.
The meme
Whoever it
questions?
was, I'm pretty sure it was Bellman. He asked the meme questions in mailbag. I'm calling you out. I know you listen every week. Put some meme questions in there, Bellman.
We need the meme. Hopefully we're back to full-length episodes and going back to almost 2 hours next week. Nonetheless, until then, look forward to this weekend's matchups. Go Houston. Just got one spot to make up to get back into the stage playoffs. I'll be obviously rooting for that. But we'll be back to record the flagship show tomorrow if you are watching live. Also, I believe ATP should be back this week. I think we're going to a bi-weekly format for that particular show, just to kind of ease the strain on the guests a little bit. But nonetheless, we look forward to everything we're putting out this week. Thank you guys so much. Asmith, where can they find you on the Twitter machine?
Look, find me at Asmith OW. Asmith OW. That's it.
No,
on Twitter.
No underscores. You're good. Yeah, I don't even remember.
Actually,
mine.
I just changed mine. It's Asmith_OW. I'm so bad at Twitter. I don't even. But Asmith_OW. Find me. Hit me up. I love to put in some nice gifts.
I am, of course, at HNP DeathBlow on Twitter. Also, you can find the show, if you want to send us any questions, there at HNP_FOWL play, FOWL play. Again, thank you guys all so much for listening. We will see you all next week. Have a good one.
See you.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. He threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the world.